problems with procrastination slash never knowing what to do, I decided I'm going to kind of just talk to you guys. So I have an outline here, but it's not very substantial, so I'm trying not to rely on that because I feel like I don't want this disconnect between me and you guys. Okay. So, to begin, how many of you have read His Dark Material by Philip Pullman? Nice, nice. How many of you have at least heard of it? So you know a little bit about it, not much. Okay, cool. So, since that is pretty much the quintessence of my Pubspeak, I will give a brief summary of this trilogy. It's a fantasy trilogy by Philip Pullman. Philip Pullman is a British author who was born in Norfolk, England in 1946, and his books have won, among many other things, the 1995 Carnegie Medal in Literature. There are other numerous awards, which kind of lets you know just how popular and widespread his books have been. And I chose to write about, or talk about rather, those for this Pubspeak because they have had substantial effect on my life and how I view kind of, not the world per se, but just my personal perspective. So, basically this is going to be in three separate parts. I'm going to talk about how I influence my views on religion, my views on consciousness, and my own personal ambitions as a writer and author. So, to start with religion, I'm just going to close this because I feel a lot better just talking to you guys. So, around when I was 9 or 10 years old, I had come to the realization that I no longer believed in God. And this came about for various reasons, which I'm not going to go into here. But basically, I went through a period where I was very insecure in my place in the world because I had grown up African Methodist Episcopal, and every Sunday my grandmother would take me to church. So I kind of grew up with this mindset that there is a God, and when you do things to please God, you go to heaven, not hell. Basic, Christian doctrine, kind of all around. So when I came to that realization, that kind of filled me with a very significant fear that when I died, I would either go to hell because I had kind of, I guess, lost faith in God, or I would drop into nothingness, as I talked about during our Diplo Society, drop into like nothingness, and there would basically be nothing left of me, basically oblivion. And that made me very scared, and this is a pretty bad time. But I read His Dark Materials, and basically people have said that Philip Pullman is one of the most outspoken atheists out there. His books have pretty significant anti-Christian, well, not anti-Christian per se, but he's very, anti-religion in general. His books incorporate a lot of religious motifs, but they kind of subvert them in such a way that's very interesting. And I guess I should give you guys a summary. Sorry, I'm just rambling. But basically, the first book takes place in an alternate universe, in alternate Oxford in England. And the main character is a girl named Lyra. And in this universe, they have demons, which are basically the manifestations of the soul that take place, that are manifested as animals. And as a child, prepubescent, your demon is able to change forms. And once you reach puberty, it'll take a settled form, and it won't change. It's an involuntary process. So basically, it takes the form of an animal that best matches your personality. They have experimental theologians, which are basically scientists, and they study elementary particles. Basically, they have advanced knowledge of particle physics and certain weapons that you wouldn't necessarily see because it takes place in kind of the 1960s version of Oxford. And basically, this girl, Lyra, is an orphan, and she lives at a college. And what ends up happening is there's a woman who, Mrs. Coulter, who's a villainous character, and basically under this authority is the magisterium, which is a kind of the church, which has a lot of parallels to the Christian church, the Catholic church that we have here in our world. And Lord Azrael, who is Lyra's father, sorry if you guys have read the book, they say he's her uncle, but he's actually a father. And his army of rogue angels and such. So Lyra and her friend Will, who shows up in the second book, are kind of caught up in this battle. And basically what happens in the third book, I'm just kind of trying to give you a grand, overlay of the whole plot, is that they find a way to enter the world of the dead using an instrument called the subtle knife, which basically can cut through the fabric of space and time, and you can enter different worlds through different portals. So they enter the world of the dead and release all the ghosts, and that kind of starts a chain reaction that sets off this battle between the kingdom of heaven and Lord Azrael and his army. And kind of overlaying this whole grand epic battle is the idea of dust, which are elementary particles of self-awareness, basically, that are attracted to living creatures that gain self-awareness, which will be part of what I'm going to talk about. So I don't know how much of that you guys kind of absorbed, but it's pretty difficult to explain in one sentence. So how this relates to my views of religion, as I said, Homer is a pretty what's the word I'm looking for? He's a pretty outspoken atheist, and one of the main themes is that the authority, God, is actually a frail figure. And there's a scene in the books where they come across a crystal container that contains a little old angel, and you don't find out in the books, but that's actually God. And when they open the crystal to release the angel, he vanishes. And there was something very significant in that for me, because I always had this kind of fear of this presence that we call God, and I thought, basically I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I decided to renounce my religious beliefs. And reading that and kind of reading how blatant Pullman was in his just this kind of war against religion having this prominent Catholic Church-esque kind of shadowy villain-esque place. I'm sorry, I'm not talking very well. That for me was a kind of validation, and that I realized while Pullman's beliefs are somewhat extreme, I think, especially the way he expresses them in the books, I found the comfort in the fact that there are others. Like, I didn't really have a conception of atheism. I had no when I was reading these books at 10, 11 years old. But coming to that realization while I was reading the books really helped me get out of that funk I was in because of that. And I kind of need this now. Sorry, guys. I'm really nervous. Sorry. Love you. I'm not good at public speaking at all. Yeah, so that's basically how that helped me. There is a scene in the third book where they, like I said, they enter the world of the dead, and that fear I had of kind of going into nothingness after we die, when I read that scene, there's a scene where basically the world of the dead is governed by harpies, and these harpies torment the ghosts, all the ghosts that have ever existed. They all go down to this world of the dead, which is just a wasteland. It's basically a field, a great field, and you mill around with there for all eternity. And these harpies torment these ghosts while they're there. So in the books, Lyra and Will, the main characters, go down there with the knife, and they release the ghosts into the surface world, our world, with the promise that all the ghosts that would come afterward would tell the harpies stories, because the harpies feed off of all the bad things that you do in life. They know everything bad that you've done, and when you go down there, they make you remember those things over and over again. So Lyra and Will convince all of the ghosts that when we die, we should go down there and tell the Harpies stories. Stories about the real world, stories about all the things they've done. Basically that's saying, if you have lived in the real world, you should have stories to tell about that, your experiences. So they are led into, after making this deal, they are led into our world, and they are released, their atoms disappear, and they are released into the air. And as fanciful as that is, I found something very comforting in that, and that my consciousness or our consciousness would not just disappear. It would kind of assume a place amongst the universe, amongst all this other consciousness out there. And while I don't necessarily believe that now, because I am older, I still take comfort in that idea, and it's kind of elevated me from this place of fear that I was in. So that's the religious aspect of that. Next, I'm going to talk about consciousness and how his diagnosis kind of opened me to the idea of self-awareness, because while I knew that I was kind of a self-conscious kid growing up, I didn't really understand what that meant as a kind of thing in and of itself. So I talked about dust when I was trying to explain the very convoluted plot. Dust being the elementary particles of self-awareness. And what happens when the demon settles is that dust becomes attracted to you, because dust is attracted to matter that gains awareness of itself. And I found that a very interesting concept. I really like that idea. The idea of demons having animals as souls really intrigued me, because I like this idea that, you could have a little thing that you could talk to, and it's part of you, but it's also separate from you, and it's kind of like always having a companion in the world. I found that very interesting, and it's also a kind of manifestation of your more basic instincts. It takes the form of an animal, so it's kind of, there's a sense of primalness about it, and basically dust, the magisterium, which is the representation of the Catholic Church in the books, considers dust the representation of original sin. What happens when humans sin? They equate sin with self-awareness. So basically what they're trying to do is keep people from gaining that self-consciousness. And dust basically is created by and nourishes life that gains awareness, self-awareness. So when that is stifled, dust goes away. And I found that a very poignant idea, because I hadn't realized that there was a kind of bridge between innocence and experience, where when you gain that age of puberty, you gain dust, you gain self-awareness, and it's a natural, the way Pullman writes about it in the books, it's a natural process. So I kind of lost that sense of alienation that we all feel, and we kind of realize, hey, we exist in the world, and we can think about the way we think, and it's kind of weird and freaky, but it's also a very good thing. And it also influenced the way I think about sin, and when humans do wrong things, and when we feel anger, fear, negative emotions, I came to the conclusion that as humans, what we do is just, it's not something to be condemned. I don't like that idea of condemnation when we allow ourselves to give rise to whatever emotions we might feel. And I don't believe that original sin is a kind of thing that humans have, that we were all born blank slates, and we have free will, and we should choose what to do with that. So that's kind of influenced how I think about humanity in general. So there's also the Golden Compass of the first book. The Golden Compass in the book is the alethiometer, which is basically an instrument Lyra uses. It's a truth teller. She can use it, she'll ask it a question, and it will give her the answer in the form of symbols. And one of the main points about using this is that if you go into using the alethiometer, you shouldn't force it to give you an answer, otherwise it won't work. You kind of have to assume a state of acceptance. The answer isn't going to come to you easily. You kind of have to wait for it to happen. There's a kind of waiting there, kind of tension, which you just kind of accept and let come into you. especially coming here to task, that there are a lot of beliefs that I had before that are being challenged now. And I've come to realize that that's not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, I think it's better to be in that state of waiting, of acceptance, accepting that you don't always know the answers, and being okay with that. Because I think through that, you're more receptive to answers when they do come to you naturally. So, my voice sounds really good, I don't know why. That's how being younger kind of influenced my views on knowledge and how it is gained. And finally, well, not finally, finally, how about that? His Dark Materials has probably influenced me in the largest way, in that after reading it, I realized that I did in fact want to become an author and write for children. And I think I realized this because reading a book that changed me in such a significant way, like altered my beliefs about, life itself, what it's like to exist in the world as a self-aware being, and kind of not have that constant fear of death and that constant fear of condemnation. I realized that that's something I would really like to do, is write a book or a novel or a series, whatever, poetry, that some child somewhere would read and kind of come to that understanding and kind of find comfort and solace in that. And I realized that that's kind of a worthy goal, and if I could achieve that, I would be happy. That's of course not my only goal, because how lucrative is writing? If you don't make it in the writing business, then what are you going to do? So that's one of my goals for the future. I think that his Dark Materials has changed me. It's kind of strange to say that fantasy novels have changed you and made you a different person, and I guess it sounds kind of strange, but I think that you can find change in a lot of different areas and a lot of different ways, and that's how I found it for me, at least partially. So yeah, I would hold on to this series. Basically it.
So to further on this dust concept, is it like the more self-conscious and more like worldly you are, the more dust you gain?
Yeah, that's basically the idea. When you gain self-consciousness, when you become aware of yourself, dust becomes attracted to you, kind of like trickles down onto you. And kind of the more knowledge you gain, because there's this idea that matter loves dust, and when matter becomes aware of itself, dust becomes attracted to it. So there's a kind of thing there where the more self-awareness you gain, the more dust you gain, and that is a good thing.
It's really interesting because usually, people consider dust as something that needs to be swept off.
Well, there's actually a biblical reference there. It's like ashes to ashes, dust to dust. They say that the name dust came from that passage in the Bible, and the magisterium, the church in the books, kind of condemns that as the product of original sin, when in fact Pullman makes the claim that self-consciousness is a thing to be treasured, and that's manifested in dust.
Okay, so my first question is kind of silly, because it's a little serious. The first question is, what animal do you think your game would be if it settles, when it settles? And my second question is, do you think there is such a thing as too much self-consciousness? Like, as in, like, obviously Pullman makes one argument about how people should be allowed to sort of take charge of their own self-consciousness. Do you think the church's or the magistrate's position in the book is completely unreasonable?
Plus, I'll address the first question first. I've thought about this so many times, and I haven't come to I like to think that if I did have a demon, it would be something, strong, independent, and powerful. But I think it would probably be something kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say like a requires a certain aspect of awareness of what your soul is like. Sometimes of what your soul is like, because it is your soul. It takes the shape of your personality, and I don't think I've reached that point where I can kind of choose an animal and say, hey, that's me. So I'll leave that question unanswered for now. But you should tell me yours later. And the second question, I think to a certain degree you can be too self-conscious, but I also think that if that happens, if you do kind of gain a lot of self-awareness, it's not something that you should feel bad about, and I think in fact something you should use to your own advantage. I think that self-consciousness is something that you gain over time, when you have experiences, when you have knowledge, and if you are kind of hyper-aware of yourself, it's something that could be very beneficial to whatever it is you want to do.
Sort of going off that same line of thought of too much self-consciousness, do you think it is, I guess my question is, you talk about how we can use it to our advantage, but do you think at a certain point, perhaps, that it's, like Jack said in his Pubspeak, you can paralyze yourself with this, and if so, how do you think, if possible, how do you think you can get around that?
I think it is possible to be paralyzed by too much self-consciousness. You become hyper-aware of your actions, your thoughts. I think there does come to a point where you're kind of in a standstill because you don't know where to go, how to leave the confines of your mind, And I think when that happens, your best option is to find a way to kind of release that, find some method of catharsis, release it, focus your consciousness on something else, kind of, focus on other people, focus on your goals and ambitions. Just don't, it's kind of a matter of being less self-centered and kind of finding something to put your passion and your consciousness into, something that you really care about. Those are kind of a sack and cheesy answer.
No, that's fine.
Sorry. I read the first book like a really long time ago. So if I ask you about concepts, sorry. But
No, that's fine.
you brought up the idea of like God is a very frail being, and then yeah. So I didn't get that part where they actually went there, but it's kind of interesting to me because like the magisterium that you talk about seems to be very powerful and very authoritative. So what do you think about that relationship, as allegory maybe for the way that the institution of religion versus the idea of God? Yeah, I don't really know how to articulate it, but
No, I understand. That's a tough question. I think I don't want to question anyone's beliefs, but for me personally, I think there is that idea that God as a being is kind of subordinate to this larger institution with all its own, the church as a culture, as its own society, as its own history. I personally like the idea of God being not frail, kind of not this driving all-powerful force that kind of dictates, what you do. I'm sorry, is that offense? I think that it is apt in that sense, and it's a bit difficult to reconcile, but it also makes sense because humans do kind of create a lot of their beliefs, and I think that element of creation, of letting it get bigger and bigger, the magisterium becoming bigger and bigger and more all-powerful, while the idea of God and of belief and of faith kind of fades into the background. And I think that's part of what led to my disillusionment with religion.
I just wanted to, it's not even like a question, I just wanted to say that that part that you were talking about, your ideas here have been challenged a lot, and I guess, I don't know, I kind of took it to also to mean you were trying to find a happy medium between having a lot of conviction and also being open to new ideas, and that resonated with me a lot, and I wanted to thank you anyway.
Can't really see, so can you hold your hand in the bunch?
Okay, so I kind of want to go back to the idea of dust
worldly thing, because I've always thought of like self-awareness as kind of moving beyond this globe and like not like immaterial, not material, I guess.
I think there's a certain amount of awareness about yourself that you can gain from being in this world, and that's part of what he was talking about, the heartbeats, and kind of when you're aware of yourself as a person that exists in this world, that only bolsters your own self-awareness because you're interacting with the environment around you. So I think there is a kind of correlation between worldliness and your own self-consciousness. Though I think self-consciousness has its own kind of group in itself. Worldliness also is a huge factor in that. Jack?
So, with do you think the depiction of the magisterium as this sort of oppressive force, I mean, how, this is sort of like Hattie's question, I guess, but more concrete. Do you think that is like an accurate accusation level at the church in the real world?
No. I think Pullman sensationalized it very much in the books, and he definitely wasn't very fair in kind of presenting an equal view of the church and of non-believers and atheists. I think there's a certain imbalance there that he probably would have been, it would have been better if he had addressed that. I personally don't have any ill will toward the church or any of its conventions. Really, I think my my kind of idea of religion is kind of a more personal thing, as I don't believe in that kind of personal relationship with God, for example. But the church itself, I really don't have opinions about that in and of itself.
Going off of that, why do you think he, given that, why do you think he chose to depict the church in that manner? Because I read them back when I was like Catholic, and so I was less than pleased with his depiction of the Catholic Church, and I feel that I would have actually been rather amenable to a lot of his messages, especially about being self-aware, until he almost, I guess, alienated me like that. And so, like, do you think that was like sort of counterproductive? Because I feel that some of the themes in that book are more universal than just like atheism.
Yeah, he definitely did alienate a significant part of his audience when he kind of set up the magisterium to be this big, bad, religious, stifling creativity and self-consciousness. I don't think that's what makes it bad at all. I think that for the purposes of his books, he definitely could have presented a more equal view of the church. So, yeah. Jim.
Hey. Yeah. Thanks for making me remember. I remember when I first read it, like I had a very, I guess, scarce conception of the Catholic Church, and like I really didn't get a lot of the religious undertones, but I had more of the ones about like, remember there are like these little subplots where there are crises where I think Lyra's daemon gets taken away,
Yeah.
and she kind of like wilts, and how some people can handle that happening and some people can't.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of like that's what I kind of fixed in on the first time I read it, and never really got it the other way around. So I guess I'm a bit curious, like as you've reread it, how have you done that, and has it hit you again in different ways, or like did you focus on the church immediately, like at 9 or 10?
As I've reread it now, and kind of not now, but like a year or two ago, I did kind of fixate more on the more abstract concepts and less on the religious aspects. The religious aspects, I think, weirdly hit me more when I was younger. But when I recently read them, I did kind of focus on that idea of the soul, of what happens when other people kind of touch your soul, of, that idea of consciousness was really what was more interesting to me, just because my interests do revolve around that. So, yeah, like you, I fixated on that a
the church was bad per se, because they had really good intentions. Like they wanted people to be secure in a certain way within their sort of worldview, and they wanted people to be like free from sin. And so to me, I saw it more as a critique of the church's paternalistic attitude rather than like religion itself. I don't know. That's how I saw it. But I didn't know he was an atheist. I knew like he wasn't hot about it. So he didn't buy into organized religion. But I didn't know if he was like.
Oh yeah, that's totally valid. I agree with you. Yeah, I guess I would consider it more of a critique. Although I wouldn't say that their intentions were particularly good, because one of the things that they do in the book is kind of sever children from their demons, which kind of kills them. So I think that their methods were not conducive to what they were trying to do, which is secure